At the beginning of the hybrid era, Ron Dennis, the then CEO of McLaren, said, "If your objective is to win a world championship, you have to have a strong OEM behind you which has the technology and capability to produce a winning engine." It has been almost 10 years since Ron Dennis made those comments, and in that time, the only teams to win the Constructors' title have all been manufacturer teams, with Red Bull being the perfect example of a front-running team that only started to contend for the championship after it became the Works Honda team. And now in 2024, after a decade with these hybrid engines, for the very first time we might finally see a customer team win the Constructors' World Championship if McLaren, powered by the Mercedes power unit, is able to catch and overtake Red Bull. And now, whilst the disparity and disadvantage of being a customer team has been massively reduced with the help of development and even rule changes, teams with ambitions of winning the title still see it as almost essential to have their own power unit. For 2026, Audi will be building their own power unit, Red Bull have created an entirely new division in collaboration with Ford and will also produce their first ever power unit, and even Aston Martin, who we know have invested heavily and have lofty title ambitions, have also secured Works status and will become the de facto Honda Works team. All of this makes it all the more remarkable that Alpine, who have been a Works team with their own Renault engines since they first came back into Formula 1 in 2016, are now willingly choosing to abandon their Renault engines in favour of becoming a Mercedes-powered customer. And now, whilst this switch still hasn't officially been announced, and Alpine could still change their mind, the mere fact that Alpine as a manufacturer even began the process for this to happen is the ultimate indictment on their own capabilities to create a successful Formula 1 organisation, and to me, it's the defining example of why Alpine/Renault are the biggest failure in modern Formula 1. Before we move on, I want to say a quick word about the paid partner of today's video, BetterHelp. For someone like me who works from home all day, it does sometimes make it difficult to find someone to talk to about my mental health, my mental well-being, or just something personal that's on my mind when I don't feel like wanting to be a burden on someone else. That is why BetterHelp has been so valuable, because it makes starting therapy much easier and less intimidating for people like me, and I have been able to try it for the very first time when I have felt comfortable to do so. BetterHelp allows you to speak to professional therapists about whatever you feel the need to talk about, either through a phone call, video chat, or even just messaging. All you have to do to start, if you're interested, is click the link in the description and answer a few basic questions which will allow BetterHelp to match you to a professional therapist to best suit your needs. You will be matched with a therapist, usually within the first 48 hours, and can switch therapists at any time, and from there they can help support you all from the comfort of your own home. If you feel like BetterHelp can support you, then use my link which can be found in the description below, or use my code ALDAS when signing up and you can enjoy a very special discount during your first month. So once again, a big thank you to BetterHelp. What's important to remember is that when Renault originally bought the old Lotus team in December of 2015, it seemed at the time that all of the pieces were being put in place to make it a powerhouse. Prior to the Renault takeover, the old Lotus team was owned by Genii Capital, which was in financial ruins with a debt of almost £100 million. That is why Renault famously got the team for a token payment of just £1, because in reality, they were also buying the team's debts. But once all of those were squared off, you had a Works Renault team with Works Renault backing and also their own power unit. However, almost since the very beginning, what's been bizarre about this team is that they have consistently been the very definition of mediocre. This is a table of their championship results, which also includes where they currently are in 2024, and apart from 2016, which is a bit of an outlier given that they only acquired the team in December of the previous year, from 2017 onwards, the team has only ever finished in 6th, 5th, and 4th in the Constructors' Championship. They have never been good enough to trouble the established top 3 teams, but at the same time, they've never been so bad that they've actually fallen onto the back of the grid with the worst teams in Formula 1. What's interesting about this phenomenon is that it both outlines the strengths and also the weaknesses of this team. Something that's really important to understand is that at its core, the Enstone part of the team and the engineers who are responsible for building the car are actually quite strong. Since 2016, Enstone has expanded from around 450 people to almost 1,000 in 2024, and with the resources that they have consistently been able to build good Formula 1 cars. Even in 2024, although Alpine started the season with statistically the slowest car on the grid, they managed to troubleshoot and outdevelop teams like Sauber and Williams very quickly to get back to a respectable level of performance. However, the Viry side of the operation, located in France, which employs around 300 people, not all of whom are involved with the Formula 1 team, hasn't had an easy existence. In essence, although both are owned by the Renault Group, Viry has always been a separate entity. Even when Renault hasn't had its own Formula 1 team, Viry has still produced Renault engines, and in the early 2010s, they powered Red Bull and Sebastian Vettel to 4 consecutive drivers and constructors titles. The hybrid era, however, saw a complete and utter breakdown in the Red Bull-Renault partnership. Renault massively underdelivered during the start of the hybrid era, with a power unit that was both unreliable and also underpowered, with an estimated 50 horsepower deficit compared to Mercedes. However, whilst anyone in Formula 1 can get things wrong, what really broke the relationship was Renault's attitude towards the problem. Adrian Newey told a remarkable story that in 2014, when he, Horner and Marko went to a meeting with the then Renault president Carlos Ghosn to try to ask him to put more funding and resources into their engine program, his response was, "I have no interest in Formula 1. I am only in it because my marketing people say I should be." 10 years on, Renault are still at a power unit disadvantage, and ever since powering McLaren in 2020, they don't have a single customer who even wants to use their power unit. The problem for them is that last season, under the technical regulations to save costs, engine development has actually been frozen, meaning you can only improve your reliability and not your actual performance. There's actually a mechanism that exists so that if your engine is at such a disadvantage that it will affect you for years to come, you can actually apply through the FIA to almost artificially develop your engine whilst everyone else cannot, so that you can catch up. This also has to be agreed by the other teams as well, and although Alpine applied to have their engine development unfrozen, the FIA and the other teams chose to reject them, meaning that their performance deficit will now be locked in until 2026. Their choice to abandon their own power unit and instead become a Mercedes customer is one that on paper makes total sense. Not only does it instantly make them more competitive, but running your own program and having to pay for R&D, manufacturing, and all of the other associated costs when you can't even convince other teams to use your own power unit so that you can at least recoup some of that money back makes no sense. But to me, it's more so the acknowledgement about their incompetence and lack of commitment more than anything else. And after having the success that they had with Red Bull, if you can't in 2024 run an engine program, how can you possibly pretend to be able to run a Formula 1 team? Whilst performance is the most important aspect of any team in Formula 1, performance is driven by people, not just by how many you have, because as I mentioned earlier, Alpine across Enstone and Viry are right up there when it comes to their number of personnel, but the right people, whether that's on the management side, on the engineering side, and of course on the driving side. I would say that for most fans, if you ask them what is the defining legacy of the modern Alpine/Renault era, they would probably say their laughable and almost shambolic ability to make headlines when it comes to hiring and firing drivers and hiring and firing team principals. Due to how corporate the team is, they have been obsessed with putting in defined plans, with their 5-year plan to challenge for the championship by 2020, and then their arbitrary 100 race plan when the team became Alpine. The problem is that Formula 1 is such a specialized industry unlike any other, being a mixture of sport, business, engineering innovation, and politics as well, that you can't just apply a traditional corporate structure because those structures aren't suited to adapting to things very quickly, and in the case of Renault, when things have gone wrong, their solution has always been to fire people and scapegoat them. That is why whenever something has gone wrong, it has always always been preceded with people either leaving of their own accord or losing their job. Going right back to the beginning, something that I don't think a lot of people realize is that their original team principal was actually Frederick Vasseur. Yes, that Frederick Vasseur. He decided to leave the team at the end of 2016 because, in his words, there was too much different vision in the management of the team. If you want to perform in Formula 1, you need to have one leader in the team and one single way. If you have two different visions, then the result is that the work inside the team is slow. For a few years, up until about 2021, Renault did feel like it had a sense of stability, and slowly but surely, they did start making progress. This was the era of Cyril Abiteboul, and whilst perhaps he is most famous for his off-track rivalry with Christian Horner, when the Red Bull-Renault relationship was at its absolute worst, with him in charge, they did manage to sign Daniel Ricciardo and eventually scored multiple podiums in 2020. Once the team became Alpine, however, in 2021, which was a marketing move by Renault to push their niche sports car brand, even though they did manage to win their first ever race, which just underlined the quality that the team had. From that point onwards, all hell broke loose. Head of Renault, Luca De Meo, became a lot more vocal, thinking he knew everything there is to know about the world of Formula 1, and new CEO Laurent Rossi, who would go on to cause a lot of damage, also decided to be a lot more involved because he also thought that he knew everything there is to know about Formula 1 as well. Rossi, more than anyone else in my opinion, is the poster child for the shambolic mess that has been Alpine. Him and De Meo constantly meddling with the race team and not allowing them to just be left alone to develop has created an environment with no stability, no confidence in their leader, and also added a huge amount of pressure onto the race team because they're constantly in the headlines for all of the wrong reasons. In early 21, they sacked Abiteboul, and for that season didn't even have a team principal, with sporting director Marcin Budkowski acting as the team's spokesperson. Then Budkowski would be sacked and Otmar Szafnauer would become the team principal for 22. Davide Brivio, who didn't even really have a clear role within the organisation, was hired and fired within less than 2 years, and Alain Prost, who had been their advisor since 2016, was also ousted around this time as well. The chaos then continued into 23 with a massive managerial overhaul. Rossi himself was sacked as Alpine CEO, team principal Otmar Szafnauer and longtime sporting director Alain Permain would also be sacked, and Chief Technical Officer Pat Fry chose to leave the team for Williams, citing a lack of ambition from the upper management. That then brings us into this year where, surprise surprise, more changes have now been made. Controversial figure and 2008 Crashgate scandal mastermind Flavio Briatore has been brought back into the team as an executive advisor, basically taking up Rossi's old role as he reports directly to De Meo. Flavio decided that the best thing to do is to sack Bruno Famin as team principal after less than a year, and in his place has appointed Oliver Oakes. Now, whether Oakes will actually be a good or bad team principal is almost irrelevant, because the real question is, now that Flavio has put in place his man, will Oakes actually be left alone to do his job and build the culture that he wants at the race team, or will he also just be scapegoated in a year or two's time if the team continues to underperform? One of the most important consequences of all of this managerial upheaval every 2 or so years is that it's also reflected in their drivers as well. Next year, Alpine will have their 8th different driver lineup in 10 years. The only seasons where they've actually carried over the same driver lineup was in 21-22 with Ocon and Alonso, and then 23-24 with Ocon and Gasly. Now, that is not a coincidence, because although a lot of drivers fall into the trap of believing in the potential of Alpine as a manufacturer, they then very quickly either want to leave the team when they get there, or in some cases want to leave before they even get there. After his massive gamble to leave Red Bull in his absolute prime, Daniel Ricciardo at the beginning of 2020 basically decided to abandon the Renault project for McLaren after only 1 season. Fernando Alonso felt so disrespected that the team didn't give him a 2-year deal, so he chose to leave for Aston Martin. And then the most iconic of Alpine fumbles was losing their own junior driver in Oscar Piastri because they weren't decisive enough to give him a proper contract, meaning he was just free to go to McLaren, and now every single time that Oscar achieves anything, it's a constant reminder of Alpine's incompetence to let him go. And now, the biggest effect that all of this instability has had on Alpine is that it prevents someone who's either the CEO like Toto Wolff or just the team principal like James Vowles from building a culture at the team that can get the best out of everyone, and also prevents them from being able to identify problems and have enough time to sort them out. Every team embodies the culture of their leader because it almost becomes an extension of that person. The culture at Alpine is a reflection of what's happened to their team principals who have been scapegoated and undermined by upper management. That's what this team is. It's political, it's arrogant, it's chaotic, it underachieves with the resources and people it has, and all of that can be traced right back to the very top of the company who don't understand how to run a Formula One team. The last words I'll give will be to four-time world champion Alain Prost, who was there right from the beginning at boardroom level and spoke incredibly honestly after leaving the team. If you look at the great success stories from the last 30 years, you will see a simple structure. Unlike an industrial organization built around 3 or 4 strong personalities coupled with a winning driver. In my years at Renault, how many times did I hear in the hallways of the headquarters in Boulogne-Billancourt that F1 was a simple sport that could be managed from home by men in place? Laurent Rossi is the best example of an inept manager who thinks he can overcome his incompetence with his arrogance and his lack of humanity towards his people. He was Alpine's boss for 18 months and thought he understood everything from the outset, yet that couldn't be further from the truth. His management stopped the momentum that the team had built since 2016, achieving these podiums and that win. Speculation of Alpine being sold happens pretty much every single season, and to me I think it's almost inevitable regardless of what the timeline will be. Luca Di Meo's official stance on this, at least in public, has been an unequivocal no. Earlier this year he gave a very interesting interview to Autocast saying, "I want to make this very clear. There is no way we are going to give up. We will not sell even a part of this thing. We don't need the money. I have had people making offers left and right, then talking in the press about it, but we are not interested. It would be stupid, and I won't do it." And now, if something is up for sale, then of course you're not publicly going to say that it is because it weakens your negotiating position. But what's interesting is that he openly admits in his own words that he's received offers left, right and center, which means that there are buyers for the team right now, they just haven't given him the right price. Yet. There's also a contradiction when he says, "We will not sell even a part of this thing," because that is a lie. They already did. In their own press release, they used the word sale when last year they sold a 24% stake in Enstone for €200 million to an investment company with huge celebrity backing. Some of the notable backers that are part of the investment group are Ryan Reynolds, Michael B. Jordan, Rory McIlroy, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Anthony Joshua, and Trent Alexander-Arnold, amongst many others. All of these celebrities already have their own brands and a huge following that's actually bigger than Alpine itself. What's going on here is actually pretty simple, and what's amazing is that Luca Di Meo in that same interview pretty much spells it out for us. These guys are experts at developing sports franchises. We are car people, engineers and technicians, but they know how to take something like the Dallas Cowboys from a value of $1 billion to $8 billion in just a few years. They know business, and that's why we need them. At no point during that statement does he mention anything about selling more Alpine road cars. What Alpine want to do is use the platform that these celebrities have to increase the awareness of the Alpine brand, which ultimately increases the value of the team. This is also where Flavio Briatore comes in. And now, say what you want about Flavio, but the one thing that cannot be denied is that he is a great businessman. If you just read the depth of his business portfolio, then you will understand exactly why he has been brought in. Flavio is there to facilitate a sale of the team. He has got connections and he can chase different buyers from a variety of different industries, and that is why his first act was to try to get the Mercedes power unit. And not only will it make them more competitive, but on paper, a team that is being sold with a Mercedes power unit is immediately more appealing than a team being sold with a Renault power unit. In 2016, Renault bought the team for essentially £98.2 million. Forbes in 2023 estimated the value of Alpine to be in the region of £1.09 billion. And now that doesn't mean that that's what the team is worth until someone actually pays for it. When Otro Capital actually put down the money for 24%, that gave us an actual value for Alpine, which Renault themselves included in their press release, valuing their own team at $900 million or £700 million. Keep in mind, the investment company that has bought into the team didn't do it out of passion. They did it to make money on their investments, and so they'll also be looking to increase the value of their asset as well. Even though De Meo has admitted to having buyers for the team already, with the next Concord agreement making it even more expensive for someone like Andretti to buy in and create a brand new team on the grid, it means that F1 right now is a seller's market. I think Renault, with the help of their investors, Flavio, and lots of other tools that they have, are looking for someone to get as close to that Forbes estimation of £1.09 billion. The moment that anyone can get even close to that billion, this team is gone. Because at this point, it's more profitable for Renault to pursue a sale of the team rather than still believing that it will help them shift more Alpine road cars. If you look at Mercedes, for example, even though they sell electric cars, the main cars that are being promoted through Formula 1 and their motorsport team are combustion or hybrid powered models of their sports cars. The Alpine brand just doesn't make sense with Formula 1 because they still don't actually have a brand new model to sell since launching the original A110 back in 2018, and Renault has already admitted that all of the cars that Alpine will eventually sell will all be electric. If anything, it would make a lot more sense for Renault and Alpine to buy into Formula E with an Alpine Formula E team, and for Viri to work on innovative electric power units that will have relevance in both motorsports and also their road cars. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated. And once again, a massive thank you to BetterHelp for partnering this video, and don't forget to check out their link at the very top of the description. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one.